2 years ago, Nintendo was looking to be in dire straits, and in some ways they still are. Since I last made a topical video on this in early 2014, the Wii U has failed almost everyone's expectations, culminating in a content drought. There's no longer much to look forward to until Zelda, which may come as late as March 2017, which is slated for release on a shorter next-gen console, codenamed the NX, unceremoniously announced via paperwork to have a March 2017 release date. It's supposedly a totally new concept, which is a familiar Nintendo strategy, but what's not is how close they're cutting the reveal to their release date. March 2017 is 8 months off, whereas the Wii U and the Wii were both revealed over a year before their release. 2016 might sound dire, but 2 years ago everyone knew that the next few years would need to be transformative ones for Nintendo. 2014's insistent denials of making Nintendo cell phone games turned out to be either bold-faced lies or a quick change of mind. Their partnership with Dina saw a jump in investor confidence, but news that those talks were beginning as early as 2010 suggested it wasn't as quick a reversal as was characterized. Their income eventually crawled back into the black and stock prices stabilized until this week's big bombshell. Pokémon Go has the mainstream media reporting on the most fervent Pokemania since the late 90s. It's everywhere, it's hilarious, it doesn't even seem like that great of a game, but people are enjoying themselves regardless, which has ballooned their stock prices, which makes for some hearty positive headlines for mainstream news outlets that might not just be nerdy enough to know how complicated the situation really is. A quick news post on The Verge characterized this as the highest day one surge since 1983, the year they released the Famicom. CNBC is heralding the comeback of Nintendo. But note, I don't mean to be a damper. I'm also excited. I actually upgraded my phone for this today, but I think the situation is more complicated and risky than it's being painted, and I'd like to inform people why. Also, I love you. Pokémon Go's positive effect on their stock price doesn't have them soaring back to the 80s. It's actually a short-term spike back to the early days of the Wii's launch, except prices have been more volatile this year. In 2014, the company was bleeding money. In 2015, they raised their profits back to zero, and neither situation is sustainable, and they aren't at the cusp of launching a new console. So what Nintendo needs is for these early Pokémon Go profits to last as long as possible, which will depend on the prospect of it living beyond the limelight of a short fad. For Pokémon Go to have a serious effect on Nintendo's profits, it'd need to make between 140 and 196 million per month, numbers that it should maintain if the momentum of its launch slowly but not sharply winds down. For my money's worth, an AR exploration game about first-gen Pokemon in 2016 has both enough nostalgic and cutting-edge appeal to make that happen. Its launch is spiking higher than their wildest dreams right now, so whatever level it balances down to will probably still be perfectly okay. But Nintendo's stock price spike isn't a 100% accurate gauge of their health as a company because Pokemon Go wasn't actually made by Nintendo. Not the headquarters in Japan, but it was rather a kind of independent project drummed up by a daisy chain of subsidiary companies allied to House Nintendo, which is why you didn't really see this game hyped up a lot before its release. Investor reports and interviews over the past 2 years never mentioned it as one of the 5 main mobile games Nintendo has been planning with their official mobile partner Dina. On that list, we have the upcoming Animal Crossing and Fire Emblem titles, one of each, so that's 2 unknowns after the first came out, which was Miitomo. And that was touted by Nintendo executives as being their first ever mobile app, even though there have been Pokemon apps released by the Pokemon Company, which is actually a separate entity that Nintendo has only a 1/3 stake in. That's why you saw phone games for Pokemon crop up about a year before any other Nintendo brands. The Pokemon Company were pitched the project of Pokemon Go by an American studio that was cultivated by Google, Niantic Incorporated, newly independent after their Alphabet reorganization. They created this game by mashing up an April Fool's video Google made in 2014 with the tech and concept behind their previous AR game, Ingress. So this wasn't really a project drummed up under the wings of Nintendo executives in Japan. In fact, their control over their brands might be less omnipotent than you may think. And it shows that, for both us and them, Pokemon Go was a surprise hit. Hardcore gamers knew about Go from announcement to some mixed reception of previous beta tests, but in no way was the hype ever evocative of the mainstream success it turned out to be. And while that's great news, it's still troubling that this wasn't the brainchild of leaders like Shigeru Miyamoto, Shinya Takahashi, or the new president, Tatsumi Kimishima, the people presumably in charge of Nintendo's future. They had more to do with securing the partnership with DINA to create Miitomo, and both Miitomo and DINA don't exactly share the positive reputation that Go has been receiving, or the appreciation of the cult following that Ingress garnered. It's easy to imagine a soulless, freemium Fire Emblem cashing in on soulless mobile strategy competitors like Clash of Clans and Game of War. The reason why you shouldn't expect a DS quality premium epic here is because all 5 of the DINA titles are guaranteed to be free. Nintendo's gotta make their money somehow, and I can't easily imagine a faithful concept of Fire Emblem being on a phone. On the other hand, though, Animal Crossing already seems like a natural fit for that model. Quick, minutes-long play sessions prodded by social gaming incentives and tons of tiny little purchases are much easier to imagine for that brand than many of Nintendo's others. Because unfortunately, a scary other kind of game are the kinds of games DINA is known for. Their Mobage gaming platform pushes out the particular kind of shovelware that has made cell phone gaming infamous, with a massive quantity of releases, very few of them successful, and almost all of them incorporating the gambling-like loot randomization chance buys. Miitomo managed to avoid that stigma by kind of avoiding being a real game in the first place, but it managed only a flash-in-the-pan success. 10 million downloads gave Nintendo a good install base on everyone's phone, but that number quickly petered out after the first few weeks. That's a fate that Pokemon Go has to avoid, but it shouldn't be assumed that it's their saving grace either. The price of a popular mobile game plummeting is high. This kind of mainstream audience tends to play only what's popular, not what used to be popular. And Go's continued success is going to rely on the devs fleshing it out fast, while avoiding potential PR disasters as more players get robbed, trip into ditches, or find dead bodies. But on a more personal level, I worry that the American studio having so much success with Pokemon might show that the old guard of Japanese Nintendo execs may finally be out of touch. They're kind of a wild card at this point. Miitomo showed more signatures of Nintendo design than DINA design, which means it relied on jokes that got old fast, tackled a social network concept that wasn't really in high demand, and had a bafflingly complex menu system just for adding friends. Which is stuff that Nintendo's never been good at, but in the online social environment of mainstream phone apps, that's stuff they're gonna have to catch up on real fast. Meanwhile, the past 2 years have had them only hinting but never really revealing their other 3 best-kept secrets. And the first are the theme parks, which is a super solid concept. Nintendo Land in real life is probably going to be brilliant. Their partner is Universal in Orlando and Tokyo. It's probably going to be real hard to screw this one up. How has no one thought of that sooner? But their second secret is way weirder, and that's this quality of life sleep aid product that makes suggestions on how to improve your diet and lifestyle. That's still chugging along with some new American partners. The only problem is that over the past 2 years since its announcement, cell phone apps have been cropping up claiming to do the same thing. I'm really wondering now if there's as much of a market for this thing as they originally thought. And their third private project is the NX, which for right now is just a swirl of rumors, partial patents, and mocked-up pranks that have suggested everything from a portable tie-in to a VR machine. The only official quotes we have on it are reiterated promises that it is some kind of new gameplay concept, so new that it's not a new Wii, it's something where they have to move away from those platforms entirely. The only other news is that Zelda's gonna be on it. It's coming out in March 2017, which is awfully close for a next-gen console we know nothing about, and that's really risky. But Nintendo's biggest successes have always been their biggest risks, but what they have to be considering are the risks their customers are taking too. With the 2 bigger, more expensive competing consoles set to release even bigger, even more expensive competing consoles in the same year, the NX is going to have to be cheap to compete, especially after the 3DS and Wii U's price tags stumbled in their early momentum. For whatever new gimmick concept they come up with this time, don't expect it to be a graphical powerhouse. It may be their last stab at a real console, but it'll be a desperate one, and it'll be coming in the middle of what's gonna have to be, and is already setting up to be, a transformative year for them. What we've learned with Pokemon Go and with the Wii U is that Nintendo's games are sadly stunted by their consoles. The beautiful accessibility and polish of their software design philosophy is something missing entirely from the Wii U and even from the Miitomo at a certain level. That doesn't mean that stuff isn't fun. I crack myself up every time I turn on the Wii U. Fun is weaved into every strand of this console's DNA. The problem is that fun isn't what sells these days. The accessibility it needed was better third-party support, better marketing, and a better name. The polish it needed was a faster OS and setup process, while better balancing the quality versus the price of its controller. And the reality check we're all facing is that Pokemon Go is doing so gosh darn well that it doesn't even matter. It's a bona fide sensation, a moment where the millions of Pokemon sales that have always been made are turning into real-life crowds. Expect to hear a lot of bragging and preliminary numbers from Nintendo about it soon, as well as a lot more armchair analysis like these when new earnings are released in about a week and a half. And then we'll see how well my predictions hold up this time.